Good morning, everybody. It's really nice to be here this morning. Can all of you hear me?
Yes.
Because I don't have a very loud voice. I have a deep voice, but not a loud voice. But I wanted to thank all of you for coming this morning. And being on this land, it's very important for for us to talk about these things because it's the way our ancestors survived for thousands of years on this land with no stores. So, I wanted to thank Lori and Reggie for inviting me to do this, and hopefully, we'll see how this goes, and we'll continue to have workshops like this on the different plants. But this is our first one, and appropriately so because Yucca is the flowers are in season right now, and they're kind of going out depending on where you're at. So they might still be available, they might not. But I wanted to start off by telling a lot of you that living here in Orange County, on our traditional land base, we just don't have a lot of our traditional land base anymore to harvest a lot of these plants. And that's why I'm really glad that I got to know Reggie and Lori, because the whole aspect of restoring a lot of these native environments is very important for us and for this land, for everybody who lives here now. It's so important because I've been in education for years, and what I always tell people is we don't have access to a lot of our traditional land base to go harvest this like others do. So it's very important for me to educate as much and to let people know that they can still make use of this, these foods, these plants. Again, like our ancestors survived for thousands of years on this, and that's what I'm always telling the kids. I do a program at Rancho Los Alamitos, a Tonga program for 3rd and 4th graders, and I've been doing it for years. And I got started doing this years ago when I first, I got into it when I met Cindy and another from our tribe, Barbara Drake, and Laurie Siskok, who's Apache in Korea. And they had formed Mother Earth Clan years ago, which was a cultural, educational, type of program that they were doing. So they're my first teachers, and they're the ones who inspired me to do a lot of this, and that's why I do it today. But what we're going to focus on today is this yucca right here, and some of these things are very new to me because my ancestors didn't prepare these some of the ways that we're preparing them today. And some of the ways that we're going to prepare them are very contemporary, but that's what it's all about. It's introducing a lot of these foods in ways that may be more palatable for the general public. And I'm not sure if you have Reggie. Hey, Lori, do you guys have yucca here? Do you have the yucca plant growing here? And the pots?
Yeah.
Okay.
I don't think there's any in the park.
Before about three ways that we're going to show you how we're going to prepare these yucca blossoms today. One of them is being marinated or pickled, and then we're actually I pickled some of the fruits, and we're going to do a yucca hash or a stir fry also with some of the yucca blossoms. But I'm going to explain a little bit of that as we get into it. The first thing I wanted to do is I wanted Reggie to talk about the relationship that some of our plants have with these insects that are very important. These symbiotic relationships that they have. Because I wanted him to start off by talking about that, the yucca moth and the yucca, because some of these plants that we have, wouldn't exist without these insects, and vice versa. They have these type of relationships with them. The yucca is one of them. Ceanothus is another plant that relies on an insect for pollination. So it's very important for these to survive that way. And I wanted, Reggie to talk about that. Does anybody, all of you here know what yucca is, right? Is there anybody who doesn't know what yucca is?
You want me to grab a plant?
Yeah, well, you can grab a plant and I'll grab a picture. Did you want to say anything about yucca?
Well, yucca of all the plants within indigenous Southern California probably is the most significant because we call it like the supermarket of plants. We use the roots for our starts and our baskets. And also it's a soap plant, so it has saponin in it, so we use it for soap. I know the Navajo tribe, when they have significant ceremonies, that's very important that as far as purification, that they use that to make a soap to wash themselves, especially the hair washing ceremony. The stalk has its own use. We used to use it even instead, people didn't have toothbrushes or toothpaste, so you have something that's very fibrous that you chew that will clean your teeth, and it's sweet, so it's also a dessert, and then you have the leaves, which are also fibrous. You have those long strands, so we use that in our basketry. If you took the edge of the yucca whippleye and all the way to the edge of the spine, that's like a sewing needle with a thread.
Cindy, do you want to say?
Sure.
Some people can't.
And so that's important. And then of course what we're going to learn about today, the blossoms. So there's just all kinds of uses with the yucca. The yucca is a very, very important plant. And knowing when to gather it, how to gather it, so that you extend the life of it out of respect to the plant too is really important. So it's something that we really embrace, the yucca. The yucca is like all year round we're using yucca. Especially as basket makers. I'm with the California Indian Basket Makers Association, so that's really important to us too. But yeah, and also with our tattooing. Because tattoos are something that today is very popular, very chic to get tattoos, but our tattoos are, it's part of our tradition. And the way we did our tattoos was the spine of the tattoo and making the ink from either from soot or from your wild tomatoes, purple nightshade, and making a mixture with some sort of a binder and using that our women would have our tattoos on our face. So there's just, it's important. It's a significant, it's a part of the whole. So it's really important.
And what I'm always telling the kids when I do the program too is this is one of the things that you can't find in the grocery stores. So it's very important that these plants still exist because we have to go out and harvest them in nature. Just like with the acorns, there's a lot of our plants that you don't find in the grocery store. So we continue these relationships with these plants today, and it's very important. But I wanted Reggie to talk a little bit about the relationship between the yucca moth and the actual yucca plant. So,
You need a tattoo today. He doesn't?
Sometimes the actors don't have to go.
Yeah.
That was kind of cool. It had like 4 or 5. So raise your hand if you've heard the story of the yucca moth before. So, do you remember why the yucca moth is important to the yucca? Almost. Very, 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 very close. He said it's the only known pollinator.
Well, that's what I was pollinated with that.
The reason why I said you're very, 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 very close is because a lot of people forget about the yucca giant skipper. So the yucca giant skipper and the yucca moth do the same thing. They both have serrated ovipositors. They both are purposely pollinating the plant, and they both combined are the only known pollinators for yucca. So there are some yucca that are pollinated by bats up closer to Mexico, but in Mexico. But here, the yucca, specifically the chaparral yucca, is only pollinated by either the yucca giant skipper more towards the desert areas, and then only the yucca moth here on the coastal areas. Now there is 2 other moths that are called thief moths, and they operate very similar, except that they don't have mouth parts. And since they don't have mouth parts as an imago, the adult butterfly / moth, and they don't do the same thing, which is the Yucca giant skipper and the Yucca moth will visit the flower of a yucca. They will use their mouth parts to ball up the pollen and then fly to a completely separate yucca, push the pollen onto the stigma, and then crawl down to the base of the ovary and insert their serrated ovipositor into the ovary of the flower itself and inject their eggs. So they do this because they know that their larvae eat the seeds in order to survive. They eat their way out of the seed pod. And it's their action of eating their way out of the seed pod many times what opens the seed pod, that triggers the opening of the seed pod. So a lot of the, or almost all of, the seed pods that you find for the yucca will have a nice concentric circle of 4 to 5, usually it's 4, channels of these little pieces of charcoal chips. They're beautiful if you haven't seen them. They glint in the sun. Black seeds, very, very thin. And one of those will have a hole right through it because that has been, the larvae eaten its way out. Now, without the Yucca giant skipper and without the Yucca moth, the yucca would not exist. And other side is, if the yucca didn't exist, the Yucca giant skipper and the Yucca moths would not exist. Now, the thief yuccas that we're talking about, the thief moths, are moths that don't have mouth parts, so they obviously don't go through the trouble of balling up the pollen and taking it to another plant. So they just crawl down to the base and eject their eggs. They look very, very similar to the Yucca moth. It's the main thing the giveaway is they don't have mouth parts to then ball up the pollen. So it's a very interesting, very cool symbiosis between these two, or I should say 3 species. But specifically, normally, from what I've heard from 2 different entomologists, one Bob Allen, the other one was Dave Taylor, that normally the Yucca giant skipper territory does not overlap with the Yucca moth, because Yucca moth are more coastal, Yucca giant skipper is more inland, but in different areas they do overlap. But it's kind of interesting to know that they normally don't, but they do the exact same thing with the exact same dependency on each other. So I find that fascinating. And to then have the end result be something that's supported many different cultures in the Southwest, but specifically out here, something so positive as the symbiosis between these 2 species allowed a 3rd species to be able to survive, and not just survive but thrive on many different aspects that's available.
No, that's pretty much.
Did you remember that?